What do you do when the world constantly tells you no? Do you change your goal, shrink your hopes, or just stop asking? If you're neurodivergent or raising someone who is, this episode we're going to talk about what all those no's really mean, and more importantly, how we can find paths to yes so that other people's opinions don't define you. Hi, I'm Dr. Theresa Haskins, and welcome to Think Differently, the podcast that challenges the status quo and explores the power of neurodiversity to create a more inclusive and accessible world. Together, we will talk about everything from the value of different perspectives to the limitless potential of human beings. We'll explore how embracing differences can lead to endless possibilities and how you can maximize strengths to make a positive impact on the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as we get ready to think differently. Hi, everyone. It's been a while since we've connected, and our paths to realizing opportunity and acceptance continue to grow steeper over recent times. Welcome to Season 3, where we are going to talk about things that are happening, and I'm here to help give you guidance and hope in today's continuously changing world. Today, I want to focus on how we get to the answer yes when the world keeps on telling us no. The truth is we all hear the word no at times in our lives, and sometimes it's a legitimate answer. Maybe it's for our safety and well-being. But more often than not, it's about permission as to whether or not we can do something, whether we'll be admitted or accepted. It's often delivered because there's gatekeeping happening, because some rule was put in place. It has nothing to do with our capabilities or enabling opportunity. When you're neurodivergent or the parent of a neurodivergent human, we see and hear no way more than we hear yes. And we can often tell just looking whether or not an interaction is going to be problematic or whether it's going to be a productive interaction. And I want to qualify that I understand that rules are created for order, but some rules are just arbitrary. They're used to keep people in and others out, and often are used to validate a majority's own worth and existence. Rules are often not absolute truths. And it's been 2 decades now that I've been working on challenging systems and increasing access. And I have to be candid, I'm tired. I'm tired of working with people who say no before they listen, before, after continuous conversations, they ultimately get to the answer of yes. There's some people who may think I push too hard, that I'm challenging the systems too often. But frankly, if the rules were real, I wouldn't be able to get a path to yes. There would be no exceptions, and there would be no flexibility. So the question isn't why I challenge systems, but the bigger question is, why do we have to fight for our rights and needs? Why are we fighting at all? Why do we continue to create systems that keep people out and challenge us to believe that our needs are not necessary or unacceptable? And so much of what we do in this world, folks, is made up. People make up rules. We make up beliefs. And if people make up the rules, then that means we can change the rules. And I know that a lot of the systems and the rules and the bottlenecks and the hoops that we have to go through to get into school or to get a job are not real because I'm helping to rewrite them every day. And nothing breaks. If anything, when I challenge normative expectations and create new paths, not only do autistic and neurodivergent people thrive, all people thrive. And so it starts to beg the question of, why are we confining and holding people back? And why are we not doing more to lift people up? When you're autistic, ADHD, or otherwise neurodivergent, or the parent of someone who is, I have to tell you that hearing the word no starts very early and you hear it often throughout your life. And over time, the word no begins to echo loudly. The word begins to change shape over time. It starts with getting no's about the quality of your child's development. You'll get criticized about how you're raising your children. You'll hear criticism about how your child is integrating or not integrating with the rest of the world. You'll hear that the way you're learning is wrong or not typical, that your way of thinking is different and abnormal. And yet, with all of these no's, parents who push see that their child keeps growing. Their child keeps learning. And despite the naysayers, they thrive. And so over time, you begin to see no as a limitation of the person saying the word, not of a limitation of the person they're trying to hold back. I have to tell you, I rarely find the word no means someone can't do something. It usually means they won't do something. And not being willing to do something and not being able and capable to do something are two very different things. So when I hear the word no, and you can ask anybody who knows me, I don't get upset or intimidated. I get angry and frustrated because my first reaction is that someone is just regurgitating what they've been told to say. They haven't put a lot of thought into the request. They aren't actually listening or thinking about what is happening. And rarely does it actually have legitimate merit. But that's my reaction. I can tell you that not everyone has a natural disposition to question authority and this drive to prove people wrong and this drive to show people what's possible. But I have to tell you that even with my tenacious spirit, those continuous no's are tiring. They can lead to anxiety and self-doubt. And if we don't support each other, those continuous no's can start to create an internal narrative that makes you start to question yourself and actually ask, am I wrong? So this episode is to tell you, listener, no, you are not wrong. When people tell you no, it doesn't mean you're less. It's just because you don't fit into this stereotypical, normalized standard and mean that everybody else seems to follow and doesn't question. But your path isn't wrong. Your timeline and a typical development patterns are not wrong. They're just different. And so I want to explore with you my being told no. Is that you just want to really think, is that no saying I can't do it or that they won't let me do it or they won't help me? And it's really important that you don't equate that to your value and your capabilities. Because the truth is with the right supports and opportunity, you will measure up. And that one person's opinion is not the final word. I have found it is never the final word. And when we find the right person with the right authority who takes a moment to listen and really work together to define a path that's enabling, empowering, it leads to quality education. It leads to gainful employment. And it leads to living full, fulfilling lives. We are all not the same, but we all have potential, and we all deserve to realize those possibilities. So I think one of the first things we have to always think about, regardless of what your challenge is right now, whether you're trying to advocate for access in education or employment or some other opportunity, we first need to be brave and say yes to ourselves. We have to believe in possibility. We have to believe in our own potential. And we can't let others' barriers or limiting beliefs determine our worth, to determine whether we're going to try to live the lives we know we deserve to live and to be respected. Because learning to say yes to yourself may be the single most important thing you will ever do. And if you don't say yes and fight for your opportunity, who else is going to do it for you? So when the world tells you no, or a doctor, or a teacher, or a boss, or some other administrator or gatekeeper, you have a few choices. The truth is you don't have to accept the no. You just might have to find an alternate path. Unfortunately, a lot of people are told no and they accept it and they stop and they shut down. We may assume that the people telling us no must know better than us. And sometimes they do, but not always. And when what you're asking for isn't unreasonable, you really do have to stop and question what's behind that no and why aren't they willing to help you find the path to yes? Is it really about safety, fairness, feasibility? Is it because you really lack capability and skills? Or is it about standards, the ways of working, the fear of breaking a rule that was predetermined by people before the person making the decision, the fear of doing something differently than it's always been done before? And often the answers and the rules that we're facing that are holding us back are not backed by logic, but by precedent and habit. It's how we've always done things. It can get to the point where no one can even articulate why they're doing it that way anymore. It's just how it's always been done. And sometimes it's because systems are designed to prioritize ease over equity. Sometimes it's used to weed people out because of scarcity of opportunity. And often it's because people are told to be more concerned with staying in line than doing what's right. They follow leaders and rules blindly. And that's dangerous. It limits progress, it limits potential, and it definitely depletes opportunity. And so if you've ever encountered these type of issues and you've never stopped to question why, if you take every answer and rule at face value, you risk folding your life into someone else's outdated template for success and narrative that you may never fit and you may never reach your individual potential. And you need to know that if you start shaping yourself around someone else's limits instead of exploring your own, you're never going to fully self-actualize. Now, I know many of us, I know I was taught not to question authority. In addition to the psychological aspect of our reactions to the word no, right? It gives a visceral response. And it will often shape how our future path and options over time develop. And it could actually change your sense of self. This is why we're always talking about supporting others, learning to self-advocate and to be allies. Because if somebody is held back too long, it will break their spirit. They won't have the power or the energy to keep fighting. And based on my experience, there are 3 common scenarios in how people react to being denied a request or a need for accommodation or an opportunity. And we need to be aware of these because if we're the gatekeeper and someone stops pushing, did we break them? And if you're the person being told no, are you folding into structures that just weren't designed for you? So the first type of person hears the denial, they hear the no, and they believe it to be true. They assume the people in power know more than they do, and therefore they must be right. And they internalize that no. They adjust their dreams and goals downward. They throttle their aspirations back. Maybe they go to therapy because they're sad. Maybe they go to school and they try to change themselves so that one day they might finally be good enough to meet others' expectations. And work to turn that no into a yes, but it may not be their version of a dream. They adopt other people's versions of what they think they should be. The second person also accepts the no they're told, but deep down in their gut, they know something isn't right. It's probably many of you listening. They know it feels wrong, but they don't know what to do because they don't know how to challenge people with authority. And they are starting to believe that maybe they aren't as good as they think they are. So they live with it. They sit with that dissonance. They're more likely to complain it's unfair, but often it makes them question themselves. It's a little bit like gaslighting. You know it's not right, but you don't really have the power or information to push back and prove it's not true. And so these people also end up on a path that just doesn't fit them because they're accepting something they know they shouldn't. And that's just as dangerous because eventually you don't just question the system, you start to question yourself. And then there's the third person, and the person I'm hoping to aspire you to be too. The person who hears the no and knows it's not right and doesn't accept it. Because they know that that answer was created by people working with the information they had at the time. And the rules that were created were built before they met you and your situation. Those rules may have served people in the past and the majority of people or protected someone's comfort zone, but they didn't take into account your lived experience, your reality, your range of skills and capabilities, and the full range of human variability. And you know you're not defective, you're just different. And you know you deserve a path to a yes to be educated, a yes to employment, and a yes to have a respected, gainful life. And you will not let anyone hold you back or define you. And that is what I'm working to strive all of you this season to work towards. Because even though I noted what often drives the no, the reasoning behind decisions that don't meet our needs, you have to understand that standards are often created to control for scarcity. And we usually don't have enough space or the belief that there's enough space or opportunities or resources for everybody. So as a culture, we've built gates and rules to limit entry because there's usually more demand than there is room. And we create these measuring sticks and standards to weed people out. Education, a place where we're supposed to go to thrive and become our best self, is still designed to create measuring sticks of competition against students. It's still meant to weed people out. And if you don't meet those standards, you're not going to rise and meet your full potential. And so we really need to start challenging ourselves and say, is education really to bring out the best capabilities and skills? Or is it just another mechanism to weed people out, the haves and have-nots, the potential and those that we're going to leave behind? Because if we really believe as education is about informing people and building skills, and if we really believe that employment is about productivity and creating monetary pathways to independent living, then we would want to build paths that give everybody the opportunity to effectively engage, more education, better workers, stronger economy. But that's not how our system's designed today. And that's limiting everyone. So we create bars to determine who gets in and who doesn't. And those bars keep changing based on the gatekeeper's decision of who they want to include and who they ultimately choose to exclude. But just because someone's not getting in through those bars doesn't mean they're not capable. Doesn't mean they don't have brilliance. It's just meaning the measuring sticks and the goalposts that are being designed are made for a very specific type of person. These filters exist and we cannot pretend that they don't. But we also need to challenge, are the filters of the past effective for the people and the future communities we're building for tomorrow? Are they leaving out the very bright minds and capabilities we actually want to include, need to include, to ensure that we as a society and human condition continue to evolve with the changing times? You do need to know that systems are not neutral. They are not built to say yes. They are not built to support opportunity. They are built to say no. They are built to control and direct and keep things moving in a predefined pattern. They're designed to manage flow, create efficiency, and maintain order for the people who execute them, not for the benefit of the people affected by them. So, if you don't fit neatly into the system, if you need different kinds of support, a different pace, a different structure, I want you to hear me, and I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken. You're atypical, and it means the system wasn't built for you. For those that have listened to my past podcasts or my TEDx talk, you know that I have seen this firsthand, and this is what I live and fight against day after day. It started with a system that didn't know what to do with a gifted child who didn't fit the age, grade, size, placement formula. And instead of asking how to adapt the model to meet a different set of needs, the answer was simply, this won't work, we can't help you. They didn't even consider whether there's another way to form the equation that would solve for yes. And so here's the thing. Most of the time, the people behind those decisions, they're not being malicious. They just do their job and follow the rules and the guidelines that have been created for them. And if they don't have the tools or are not empowered or not willing or wanting to try to bend or rethink things, you're just going to keep running into denial. And when you internalize too much of these negative feedbacks, it does something to you. It wears you down and it teaches you to make yourself smaller. When in actuality, these are the moments you need to stand up and rise and become bigger. It's a fact that a lot of therapies aren't designed to help you be more yourself. They're designed to help you act more like everyone else. We push autistic kids to make eye contact. We even coach them on how they better connect so that they can fit in with the majority. We ask ADHD kids to stop moving so much that we will medicate them to slow them down in classrooms. We medicate them not because they're actually broken, but because their behavior doesn't match someone else's definition of typical behavior in the classroom. And when we take these bright, brilliant kids and tell them that they're not good enough, that how they work isn't right, that if they don't change, they won't be successful, this is what leads to burnout. And they'll grow into adults that perform but feel hollow, mirrors of what they think others want them to see, instead of reflections of their true selves. They learn to survive by shrinking their authentic self. So much of this ties back about how we think of success. And I've said this many episodes, and I will continue to say this. And people talk about this concept of belonging, but who belongs? And we have been taught that success is scarce, that if too many people succeed, no one can stand out, that if someone else wins, we lose, but it's just not true. If you've ever lit a candle and had a flame and used that same flame to light another candle, it doesn't dim the first candle. Your flame still burns and everything after it continues to grow. Imagine if we actually spent time lighting more flames to create a brighter world. We're still operating with this primitive mindset, and we see competition everywhere, and it's fueling hoarding and gatekeeping and fear. But I'm telling you, another person's success doesn't have to threaten your own. Another person's progress doesn't diminish your accomplishments. It doesn't have to be a competition. Life doesn't have to be a competition. Teachers and coaches know this. This is why they're wanting to help their students improve and learn, because we know that when we share our knowledge, other people grow and we all raise up with them. We want our students to surpass us. That's how legacy works. That's how civilizations continue to grow and thrive. So saying yes to yourself in a world that constantly says no, it's not rebellion. It's survival. It's reclamation of yourself. Most of the rules we follow are not natural laws, they're human agreements, which means humans can change them. We can choose new models. We can build new systems that support more people. We can create futures that don't confuse probability with possibility. So if you're still listening and you've been living under a lifetime of no's and negative comments and people telling you that you can't or you're not good enough, or you're a parent just now starting to hear them with your young child, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not too much. You're not asking for too much. And you may just be asking the wrong people for support. I can tell you in my experience, when you get past the administrators and gatekeepers to the real decision makers, the actual teacher, the actual professor, the manager you'll be working with, I often find those people are actually very amenable to working with you and meeting with you. I didn't say all, but many, many are. Teachers usually don't ignore students who raise their hand and ask for help. Managers usually want their people to work with teams. We usually strive to help each other succeed because that's what we're trying to do. So let's stop removing the human from the interaction. You know, the people that have actually worked directly with me and my children and my family, they've never made me feel like I was asking for too much. The teachers were never the problem, but it was the policy enforcers, the administrators, the ones who were following the rule book and deciding if we could come in or not. That's where the anxiety came from. That's where the no's were coming from. But the people who actually do the work with you, they get it. They're great. So this season on Think Differently, we're going to start unpacking every single one of these, from access to education, to quality therapy, to workplace access and accommodations, to how our culture is building systems where you may or may not be included effectively. We're going to unpack it. We're going to talk about where the system's breaking down and how we can start building lives in schools and homes and workplaces and a world that supports us. And the answer, yes, because it's not easy, and not because it will happen fast, but because you matter. Every life matters. And saying yes to yourself isn't selfish. It's the first step to building a better world, one where difference isn't disqualifying and where every person has enough room to thrive. I'm here for you, and I believe in you, and I know we can do this together. Thank you for listening to this episode of Think Differently. I hope you found our discussion today insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank Audio Works Studios for their exceptional production and recording support. Without their expertise and dedication, this podcast would not be possible. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Your support helps us to reach new audiences and promote neurodiversity in our world. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Think Differently.